We've been sold a lie about pinning our happiness on circumstances and events and experiences. That's a recipe for chasing happiness all your life and always feeling some sense of existential angst. My first book I read was Andrew Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that started me on a journey. And I read literally thousands of books in a bid to change my life, in a bid to try and feel better, get better outcomes, change my life and get a better outcome. And I worked with a number of gurus, some of whom are very well known around the world, some of them less so. But my life didn't change very much. I just felt I knew more, but life wasn't really improving. I think there was a few turning points. One was being at a real low, and I met with a wise mentor who since died, and he said, Rob, he says, you've really only got two problems. He said, you might think you've got a whole load of other stuff that you need to deal with, because I felt like I had a whole load of stuff that I needed. I was spinning plates. I had a whole load of things. He said, you've really only got two problems. And he said, you're ignorant and you're arrogant. And he said, and if you cure your ignorance, you'll probably cure your arrogance in the process. And it turned out he was right. I was ignorant, and it was ignorance of who I really am. And so when I started to explore that, we can really only get to that experientially, although we can run through an intellectual process where we can get to it. But the actual revelation is experiential. And so when I cured my ignorance as to who I am, I realized that I am free, fundamentally free to choose whatever it is I'd love it for and in my life. And I think it's that freedom to choose what we'd love is the key, because we're so often, because we don't know who we are, what we're doing is we're going through life trying to mitigate our fears. We're experiencing an underlying sense of I'm not worthy enough. Whereas when we know who we are, we realize that this human adventure, we came here to experience limitation. We didn't come here to become more. We're already everything. We came here to experience limited aspects of ourselves in the mind, and we're free to choose whatever those are. At least we're free when we know. We're not free when we don't know. But I believe the game of life is one of remembering who we are so that we can wake up in the game, in the dream, and have a harmonious life experience. And we recognize the oneness of everything.
That simplicity of stop trying to figure it all out, but rather see it for what it is and play from that place. Like, I don't know if that resonates with you, but that's how I derive a great sense of presence and peace. And I'd love you to just comment on that and see if we can scratch at that a little bit more.
So what does experience consist of? Well, thoughts, feelings, and sensations would be our inner world experience. And then we have what we're imagining, what we're remembering, which is also imagination, and what we're perceiving with our senses. So what we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. And that is our entire life experience. There is never anything more to our life experience than that. And all of that experience is pervaded by the knowing of it. So who or what is it that is aware of the experience? Who or what is it that's aware of the knowing of the experience? And that's our true nature. I am aware of being. I'm aware of my thoughts. I'm aware of my feelings. I'm aware of my sensations. And the fact that I'm aware of them means I'm not them. They come and go, but the awareness that I am remains. The same with what I'm imagining, what I'm perceiving, and all the rest of it. They all come and go, but the awareness of being remains. And that awareness of being is happiness and fulfillment itself. And it's the background, it's the backdrop to all experience. And yet, relative to experience, it's perceived to be very bland. But without the experience, without that backdrop of awareness, we can't have the experience. Just like we can't have this call now without the screen. And yet, how many of us have noticed the screen? the challenge with getting out of the intellect is we're 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 educated to formulate. We're literally adulterated and educated to formulate, to develop our intellect and our egoic identity. And on our journey, typically what happens is we learn to protect our heart. We learn to shut ourselves down, if you like, because we've been told certain things about ourselves along the way that have hurt our heart. Things that aren't fundamentally true, like you're not good enough. You've not been good enough to deserve that toy or to have that sweetie, or you're not intelligent enough or bright enough, or people in our family don't do these kind of things. If you want to get a real job, or if you want to do well in life, you've got to work really hard. So we form this egoic shell. And then that determines all of our subsequent experiences. And then we go believing that that's true about ourselves. And because it's not true, we feel the contraction of that. And then we go trying to resolve that identity issue without realizing what it is we're actually trying to do. So people they're feeling a certain way and they're taking action based on that feeling to really try and resolve an identity issue. Whereas if they resolve the identity issue first, then everything else flows from there. They don't have to worry about endless action and behavior. So it's inside out rather than outside in, or topside down versus upside down, however you want to phrase it. But the problem with the intellect is it's become a protection mechanism for so many people. So surrendering our intellect to the present moment, which is life itself. There is no life outside of now. Now is who we are. It's not a moment in time. It's who we fundamentally are. So surrendering our intellect to now is really scary for many people, and I know it was for me. I thought, how can I surrender? I've got so many plates to juggle and so many responsibilities.
And I guess so, Rob. I love that, and it begs the question. Pardon the pun, but it begs the question: how do you resolve that? How do you surrender? So there are so many of us who find ourselves, like you say, we're trying to resolve a feeling issue on the outside rather than seeing that it's something to be resolved on the inside. But how do you do that? Like, what direction do you point to people to say, this is what it means to resolve your identity issue. This is what it means to surrender. And this is what's on offer on the other side of that.
I think one of the ways that's helpful, provided we don't use it as a mechanism for beating ourselves up and inducing guilt and shame and regret, is to recognize the parallel between our experience, our circumstances, and our inside world. And if we say, well, actually, I can see that my story is playing out in my experience, and that my inside world is creating my outside world, that can be a bit of an uncomfortable truth to embrace, but it's the truth that sets us free. And it might not be an exact match. It's a symbolic evidence. It's like the hall of mirrors in a fairground, when you go as a kid and you know it's you in the mirror, but the reflection's distorted. But we can see, if we were willing to look, and we say, without as I say, without guilt or judgment, and say, can I see that my outside world is my inside world on display? And if we can, then it's about accepting that our circumstances just are. They need us for the meaning. If you've only got $1 in your bank or £1 in your bank, that has no meaning in and of itself. Nothing has any meaning in and of itself. Everything needs us for the meaning. So if we accept the circumstances for they are as just what is, and we're willing to say, well, actually, I love myself enough, and I want to love my life enough that I'm willing to start to change my inner story and my inner world for the love of it, because that's ultimately all I really want anyway. And then my outer world has to follow. And so it's a question of surrendering to our inner world. All we're ever trying to do in life is to free our inner self. Everybody all action, if you like, is in pursuit of a feeling. So if we're just willing to say, well, actually, nothing in the outside world can make me feel anything. It's me that makes me feel everything. And what is it that drives my feeling? Well, it's where my awareness is placed, because who I am is awareness, back to the earlier point. And so if I place my awareness on what I'd love, my feelings will resolve themselves. They look after themselves. They're just a lag indicator. But when we go trying to resolve the feeling, we're working at the wrong end of the spectrum. We've got the wrong end of the stick. But that's what we do, because why do we want to feel better? Well, because who we are is love. Everybody's trying to come back to themselves in taking action in the world, but it's all back to front. How can the new car in the driveway make me feel anything? And if I place my happiness on the car in the driveway, what happens when I go to the supermarket and someone runs into the side of it? Like if my happiness is reliant on the car then I'm going to have a really rough ride. And then I'm going to be spinning plates to try and hold my happiness together. And there's absolutely nothing. We can have the car and the house and the money and all of that stuff. When we know who we are, we know that's what we're here for, is the experience. But we've been sold a lie about pinning our happiness on circumstances and events and experiences. That's a recipe for chasing happiness all your life and always feeling some sense of existential angst.
We keep hammering that point on this podcast because I honestly believe that for our listeners and the listener out there, that is one of the most powerful things that people can ultimately get to see, is that we feel our thinking, and the moment we realize we are not our thinking, and we can step back into the lazy boy and observe it, that can make all the difference.
Absolutely, yes. We feel the thinking that we're believing, and often the feeling is supporting us to become conscious of what we're thinking and believing, so that we can literally become more conscious as we go through our lives. But you're absolutely right. All anxiety is separation anxiety. Believing that we're separate from ourselves, believing that we are just a separate body in the world with a mind. What's called the ego, the belief in separation. And all anxiety is a function of that.
You said all anxiety is separation anxiety. And so, I think you're pointing to an illusion of separation, perhaps.
Yes.
So if we're not separate, like, what are we? Like, how would you articulate that? Again, like, I'm fascinated to try and bring it back for myself and for anyone else to be able to go, okay, because I can hear that and I'm like, oh yeah, I know that's the illusion. So the illusion is separation. What's the truth, and how do we again kind of come back to reconcile those two things, even if it's like almost philosophically or spiritually, to go, oh, right, that's what's on offer. Can I see that?
So the illusion is a real experience. It's not about trying to get rid of the illusion. It's the illusion is real, but it's just, the definition of an illusion is it's just not what it appears to be. So if we go to a theater and we watch a magician on stage pulling a rabbit out of the hat, it looks like he's pulling the rabbit out of the hat. If he invites us backstage and says, here, I'll show you how I did it, the rabbit doesn't actually come out of my hat, it comes out of the inside pocket of my coat. Then we go back into the audience and we can watch the magician again the following night. It still looks like he's pulling the rabbit out of the hat. The illusion still looks like the illusion, only this time we're sitting in the audience going, he doesn't pull the rabbit out of his hat, it comes out of his jacket pocket. So we're better equipped now to relate to the illusion in a way that's supportive. So what is the illusion all about? Well, who we really are fundamentally at core level is pure unconditioned consciousness, love, awareness, God, infinite intelligence, the quantum field. Give it, there are any number of names to describe it. A lot of people have a challenge with the word God because they associate it with religion. I'm talking about transcending religion when I refer to God. But so who we really are is pure consciousness, awareness. And then that entity, that being is infinite and eternal. So how does that being have experience? If you're infinite and eternal across all time and space, although time and space is a construct of the mind, how do you have experience of yourself? And the answer is, well, the only way is to create the illusion of not being yourself, to create the illusion of separation, subject and object. Because if you're just oneness, you can't have any experience. So the mind creates the illusion of separation. But as quantum physicists have told us for more than a century now, all of experience is just, it's consciousness, it's energy. You dive into the solidity and the appearance of things, it's just energy on the move, appearing as form. And so we live in this world of perceived duality where everything has an opposite. You have a subject and object. You can't have black without white. You can't have tall without small. It's a world of opposites, and operating in the mind where all experience is. What we're really trying to do is come back to ourselves. And who we are is the present moment. Where the problem with being wrapped up in the mind is the ego can't survive in the present moment, because the ego is the illusion. So the ego is invested in fulfillment in the future. When you've done this, when you've had something to eat, when it's the weekend, when you've been on holiday, when you got this money, when you got the deal over the line, when you've got the new car, the new house, new relationship, the ego is always invested in the promise of fulfillment in the future. And the challenge is that when we get the deal over the line, or we get the new car or the new house or whatever, in that moment, it feels great. We pick up the keys, we get the deal, someone says yes. In that moment, it feels great. But it's not the deal or the car or the house that is what's caused us to feel great. We've caused ourselves to feel great, but what's really going on is the collapse of separation. We've come back to the present moment, out of the mind, back to ourselves. But the problem is, without the awareness of that, we think, well, no, it was the car, it was the deal. And then the next day we wake up and we think, I need another deal. Or a year later, I need a new car. Or we drive past someone and they've got the newer model. And now we're not worthy, or we're not good enough anymore. And the chase continues because we're mistaking the illusion for the truth. And the paradox in all of this is, if we come back to the truth about who we are, getting what we want in the illusion, in the world of the illusion, is so much easier. Because we've not got the resistance now. We're not literally fighting with ourselves. That's what we're doing. We're fighting. We're in our own way, literally.
For somebody who is stuck in a super anxious place, or somebody listening to this who has been really struggling with anxiety, or is in a dark place, they may want to understand the nature of the illusion. They may want to be invited backstage to see how it all actually is, but that's a very difficult place to go. And so I would love to, because you mentioned the coaching that you do, and your school of thought around duality, or the non-duality of things. How do you practically take that first step with somebody who's really in that dark, anxious place?
Do you want to do it now? Take about a minute.
Yeah.
So if yourselves, your listeners, if you just close your eyes, other than if you're driving, of course, or operating heavy machinery, but if you just close your eyes and just use your breath to return your awareness back in on itself. Just take 2 or 3 deep breaths. And then imagine now that you're a completely newborn infant. So you've no memories of the past. You're brand new into the world, no memories of the past, no ability to label anything. You're brand new into the world. And if I was to now ask you, what's the first thing that you could tell me about yourself? Most people's answer is just, well, I am. I'm aware of being. And so that blank canvas that we are remains available to us at all times. So we can be absolutely in a state of anxiety, depression, entangled in the mind, caught up, feeling depressed, feeling very out of sorts. But who we are, that stillness, that peace, that our true nature, consciousness, it's never more. It's literally closer than breath. And the breath, one of the reasons breath is so revered in so many spiritual teachings, it's the portal between non-duality, oneness of who we are, and the world of duality. It's symbolic, if you like. It's in and out. But consciousness itself isn't in and out. It's just oneness. So we can take ourselves there whenever we want, and breath is a very helpful tool for doing that. Just returning our awareness back in from the contents of experience. One of the challenges, though, which we may face along the way, is that if we have been identified, and certainly was my journey, if we've been identified for so long with struggle and hard work, and we've been validating ourselves with that, and I know I did. I used to think working really hard was something was commendable. So I identified with hard work and striving and struggle, and I was very willing to tell my stories about what a hard and challenging week I had and all the rest of it. So I was identified with that. And so in trying to get away from that, if we're not anchored to what we love, the likelihood is that old identity is going to want to hang on. And in a physical sense, we have neuropeptides and a physiological addiction to our old state of being. So the key really is to set up the right structure in consciousness to support us to make the shift. There's technically no structural connection between now and the start of this call or the start of my sentence. There's no structural connection other than that which I hold in my consciousness. It's like the frames of a movie, of a film. One image has no relationship to the next image, but they're moving through a lens at a certain speed where it looks continuous. But if we have and I appreciate maybe going off on a tangent here, but if we have an identity of being the yellow pencil, and perhaps that's not, we're now ready for something different. And how do we know we're ready for something different? Well, typically because we start to feel a certain way. Awareness is ready for a new experience. So all we need to do is bring ourselves as awareness to what it is we'd love using our imagination. But if I'm a yellow pencil and I've got a pretty traumatic experience, business is rubbish, I'm not earning enough money, I've got pressures, I'm anxious, all the rest of it, I might want to try and get away from that. But as I said earlier, most people are trying to get away from being the yellow pencil to being something different. And if we're going after, if our motivation is fear-based, led by fear, by ego, then typically the tension that we set up with the wanting, New Year's resolutions, that tension has to be resolved. But typically what happens is it gets resolved that way. We go into another year of striving, and we end up Christmas this year, and it's saying, oh, life's not changed very much. Whereas if we say, well, what would I love? And that's the challenge for people, is actually accepting what it is they'd really love, because often that scares the hell out of what they think they want. I can tell you now, I did not want to become a coach. That scared the hell out of me. But I was willing to listen to what I'd love. And I knew it was doing work I love, helping out, time and money freedom, doing work I love, helping other people. But that, for my ego, that was super scary. So if we set the structure and consciousness up in the right way, then that tension gets resolved in a way that supports us to then be living the life we love rather than living the life we're trying to escape from.
Something you said before that really struck me. Getting what you want in the illusion is easier than you think. And it's like, where does that live? How do you set that up for yourself in a way that you have the both end, the love and the peace and the presence, and the experience of playing the game of creation?
Yeah. I'll give you my understanding, if I can. And it relates to free will. Where does free will reside? Because we like to get up every morning and think that we're in charge of our lives and that we've got free will to choose whether we go to the gym, whether we eat that cake, whether we don't eat that cake, whether we earn X this year or whether we earn Y. We love to believe that we've got free will over our choices. And yet my understanding is that our free will starts and ends with who and what we're aware and conscious of being. So if I'm aware of being the yellow pencil guy, it doesn't matter what goals I set, what resolutions I set, what plans I have. If my awareness, because awareness is who I am, expressing and experiencing in the mind, it doesn't matter what goals I set and what I do, what actions I take, if my awareness doesn't shift from being the yellow pencil guy, then I get to the end of the year and I'm still the yellow pencil guy with circumstances are basically where circumstances really are surrounded by what we stand for. That's what it means. We're surrounded by what we stand for. So unless I happen to land on something as a function of setting a goal, which I then use as my permission slip for saying, oh yeah, I found this thing, I found this guy, Al Kenny, and he's really helping me. If Al Kenny becomes my permission slip for shifting my identity, then I get to have the results. But the key is going, actually, Al Kenny was a great facilitator, really helped me, but what shifted my results was me shifting my identity. And when we get that, that's the key, that's the only thing. I shifted my identity into being the person who knew they were going to get the results. And I started living from that fulfillment, and then that fulfillment got expressed. The key is to go, if I had my life as I wanted, who is that version of me? And to get to know that version of ourselves and to accept it in our heart, accept it in consciousness, and then we're moved to make the choices that correspond, because we're not in charge of our decisions anyway. We just like to believe we are. And one of the things that I observe is, and certainly was the case with me, was, ask people whether they'd like to be wealthy. If they've been struggling and never had enough money, would you like to have more money than you can shake a stick at? Most people say, yeah, I'd love that. You say, well, how does it feel to be that person? I go, well, I don't know. They've never identified with wealth. They've identified with struggle. So we've got to identify first with what it is we want to express and experience, because our awareness is what's being pushed out in the mind as experience. So that's the key, Al, and we can then leave all the other stuff alone, all that relentless doing and action taking that most people, if they're honest, put their hand up and say it was just another year of similar, which is fine if we've got a number of things in our life that are working really well. It's that's great, but most people, if there's three legs to the stool, health, wealth, and relationships, most people have got a leg that's a bit wobbly that they would like to have a bit more stable, perhaps.
Yeah, it's a funny one. It feels like I think this is the trap or the challenge for many of us, which is you get what you want by letting go of what you think you need. It's interesting to me. You ask people, what would you love? And it sounds like it should be an easy question to answer. It's like, well, of course I know what I would love. But then when they go to articulate it, they get stuck. It almost struggles to even come out of their mouth, because somewhere like their intellect is already going, well, like you can't say that because who are you to have that? And therein lies the challenge that has to be resolved. It's like the ultimate, like, who are you not to have that? And can you can you be with what you would love without objection, without putting conditions on it? And I'm curious again, like this is what it looks like to me to surrender, which is, oh, that's what I would love. Oh, well, that's cool. Like I can love that. And surrendering means loving it without having it in order to then have it in the physical sense or in the actual sense. And that's
Yes.
what looks to me like both the opportunity and the challenge, because it's kind of one of those that you go, yeah, that doesn't sound like anything that I was ever told when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, 20. It's
Exactly.
like it's the exact opposite. But and I'm curious whether there's any practices or experiments that you might offer to people in the same way as you did on the anxiety side. Are there any practices, experiments you go, well, you can just go and test this out, because I'm really taken by the experiential side of it, because it's like, don't believe it, try it and see. And then when you experience it, suddenly you go, holy shit balls, like that just worked.
The key with putting it to the test, Al, is to start to play with things that we might like to have the experience of, but that we're not attached to. So, and start telling ourselves a story that's commensurate with something we might like to just have a bit of fun with. Like, people are always holding doors open for me. I see people in high-vis yellow jackets. I had a call with an American client yesterday, and he said there's a field that in behind his house that's owned by somebody down the road, and he said there was 2 vehicles lying in the field, and he said, I thought to myself the other day, I'd really like to buy those vehicles. It'd be great if I could buy them for $250 each. I think they're obviously not roadworthy or whatever. I don't know the detail, but anyway, lo and behold, he bumps into the guy who owns the field, and they got chatting, and he said, I see you've got 2 old trucks in the field. And he said, yeah, they're a bit of a pain. I could really do with them out of the way. I don't suppose you'd like to buy them, would you? And he said, well, how much would you want for them? He said, well, $250 each. And he said, he said, what a remarkable coincidence. But there are no coincidences. There appear to be. And from a logical, linear perspective, we can't see the way that consciousness is moving. But we can play with change our stories without the attachment, and the world shows us the evidence of our new story, if we're paying attention.
We often speak to people on the show, and I know in the work that we do, and they have real evidence of those moments when things are made manifest, and they often cite them as these incredible moments of coincidence or what have you. And I think to be able to point to what you've just pointed to say, no, this is part of the oneness. This is just the evidence of your consciousness in action, is incredibly powerful.
Yes.
And it helps.
Yes.
It helps wrench people away from the me and roots them firmly in the I.
For me, it is like putting it to the test. Like when I was in your group, and just even that simple experiment, with like I had 2 or 3 things. Like I think we created a list of 10. I think you had created a list of 10. I think 7 out of my 10 came to pass within a very short space of time. One was wanting someone to get in touch with me that I hadn't spoken to in just under a year, and it happened on that day. And then the most bizarre one for me, because I really wanted to I was thinking, how do I put this to the test? And I said I wanted to see I'd love to see a white owl on my morning walk. That was no, like it's kind of still seems so bizarre to me. My headphones stopped working on one point on my walk, and literally as they stopped walking, an owl just kind of came right across in front of me, perched in a tree.
Right.
And then as soon as I walked past it, my headphones started working again. It was like everything stopped for that moment. And like I cannot
Amazing, yeah.
explain that at all, other than It was just it was such a fun experiment, and it meant nothing to me. And again, people might listen and go, "That's total hocus pocus." But like the piece that you said before about like, what if it's just so much easier for us to have everything we would love in this a game, the massive illusion of life than we think, if we're prepared to just let go of
Yes.
our intellectual notions of how the world should be and is, and our intellectual knowings.
Yes. And if we're doubtful about all of that, then the best thing we can do for ourselves, if we'd love a more harmonious life experience, or a more abundant or wealthier one or healthier one, is to go and look at the science of it. If we're doubtful, go and look at the applied mathematics, applied philosophy, quantum physics, metaphysics. Dive into the science of it if you're doubtful. It's very humbling. Marianne Williamson, I think it was, that said I forget, I butcher her quotation, but it was about us we're fearful about our own power. It's our power that scares us, not our limitations.
Yeah.
Like, how scary is it to think that you could have anything you want? Like, for most people, that's scary as hell.
Yeah. Yeah, because it kind of brings it all back home to, well, if that's true, then it really is all up to me, only like 100% of the time, and that's the bit that then goes, oh damn, okay, so like that's it's kind of the thing. It looks like we want it, but then the scary bit is, as soon as we give into it, it's like, oh right, now I get the opportunity to live into that.
Yeah. And now I have to give up. Now I have to give up my old stories and my complaining and my bitching about the world and other people and all the rest of it. I have to, in order to be responsible, I need to be responsible. And most people, the price of the awareness is more than they want to pay, in terms of they want to hang on to their old story and change their lives, and we just can't. We're at one with it.